What's going on, Digital Wildcatters? Got a fun episode today. Got my boys, Justin and Ryan from J Energy, not to be confused as Jai Energy. It is J Energy, just for anyone out there that is mispronouncing it. Definitely wasn't me saying Jai Energy. So really, fun topic on Bitcoin mining. And what I like about you guys, that's kind of how I introduce y'all, is that anyone that talks about Bitcoin mining today really takes it from like the ESG angle with flare mitigation. But what I like about you guys was oil and gas background. You guys came from the oil and gas industry. You saw an opportunity. I don't know if the right word is arbitrage, but just saw a new way to unlock more value from natural gas than just putting it into a pipeline. So I think that we're gonna have a really interesting conversation today. So first, tell me a little bit about y'all's background. I know, PE backed operator. Let's talk a little bit about that and kind of how you guys came together and converged on this idea of Bitcoin mining.
Yeah, we'll play off each other during this whole
There
thing.
you
All
go.
right, so
I typically jump in and interrupt them.
yeah,
That's fine.
Yeah.
it's all right. I've been married like 18 years, so I'm used to it.
Yeah.
Don't worry about that. I hope my wife doesn't listen to this, but yeah. So we were at Century Oil and Gas, which is a private equity backed company. We were focused on the PRB up in Wyoming, and it was kind of eastern part of the play, really trying to step out and prove up the basin. And so we had drilled an exploratory well in 2018, and we were running out of our kind of flaring allowance that we were allowed up there in Wyoming. They have some fairly strict flaring regulations. And so looking for options of what to do so we can continue to produce oil, really the only thing that made sense from an economic standpoint, because of the cost to put a pipeline in. We were getting some very high quotes, and they were wanting us to pay quite a bit of money on a per MCF basis and keep the liquid. So it really was just, it became completely uneconomic. And so the only option we really could come up with was a Bitcoin mine, putting it on the location there. And there had been one other operator in Wyoming that had done that already. So we were the second group to do so, at least to our knowledge. And so we got that going. We put it out there, and then just over time, Ryan and I were just looking things over, and you can kind of back calculate what things would be on a larger scale. And we just kind of went together and thought about this and said, why, what are we doing? There's a huge arbitrage on this hash price, and like we can generate some serious income. And so we decided to start pursuing it, and went out trying to raise some money, and got some money raised, and went after it.
It's all history from there,
Yeah,
huh?
Yep.
yeah.
So it was really kind of out of necessity that you guys had this stranded asset, no way to get the gas to market. Um, how did that process go back in the early days? I think you said it was
Mm.
2018, getting a mine set up. I mean, did you guys have any experience with Bitcoin or Bitcoin mining? How was ordering the ASICs and like figuring all of that
Yeah.
out?
Yeah, I mean, so I was looking after all of our day-to-day operations at the company, and to be honest, I didn't care or even really want to learn at the time anything about Bitcoin mining. Like we just looked at, can we get a company in to help us get this set up, get rid of this product. We really just want to, get rid of and get our oil production online. And so it wasn't until we kind of had it running and we're digging into it a little bit and trying to understand, what is it that we actually have out on our site now. Let's dig into this a little bit more, especially during 2020 when oil prices dropped, and we were having some various issues out in our location where oil prices were low. We had hole in the tubing, or broken rods. We had to get a rig out there, but on top of a well that's down, you got a Bitcoin mine that's down, and you're like, okay, well, let's dig into this a little bit more and see what we're sitting on. And it's what really, once we start digging into more and trying to figure out, what we really had on our location, is like, hey, there's an ability to do this probably on a much more grand scale than what we're doing currently on this location. And let's see if we can improve upon this or build it, bigger basically.
Yeah. Did you guys run into like issues? I mean, talk about all the issues that you have in oil and gas, from a mechanical standpoint, and then you introduce this new type of surface facility that's very electricity driven, and you start having computers and, just IT related
Yeah.
issues, what are like the growing pains that you guys learned
Yeah.
in those early days?
So yeah, Ryan's got a good take on that. He's talked about this actually a few times, just about the difficulty on a mining operation versus the risk we take on some of the wells that we
Yeah, I mean,
drilled in the past.
I don't think I want to like downplay anything that we're doing on the Bitcoin side of things, because it's not just go up, throw it up, and you're fine,
No,
right?
yeah.
But I think oil and gas guys can definitely relate to especially on the operation side of things, like the extreme amount of risk that we try to mitigate every single day. And it's like in planning, you got to make sure your geology's right. You got to, as you're getting ready to drill, you got to make sure you've got water sourced and ready to go. Drilling, there's obviously an insane amount of risks that take place. Completions, there's an insane amount of risks. Everybody's, after you're finally done the frac, they're like, all right, things are good. And it's like, oh, wait, we still got to drill out. And, there's people sticking coil all day long, trying to drill plugs out, and then getting your well online, having to make sure your facilities are running properly. Like there's an infinite number of things that can go wrong on the oil and gas side. And, when we're taking a look at the Bitcoin mining operations, like, yeah, there's definite things that you've got to make sure you're doing right. But comparing it to bringing a well online, it's definitely, that's one thing we try to talk to oil and gas companies, and they're like, we don't want to deal with this. It's in over our heads. This is too complicated. And we're like, guys,
it's not shit
like,
compared to what you do.
Yeah,
we drilling 2 miles down and 2 miles out.
Yeah,
I think there's like, like Chuck was like, at the end of the day, it's plugging computers in. You have a lot of smart engineers at these. I was like, well, I don't think it's as easy as just plugging in computers. Like there's definitely more nuance than that. But then it's like on the other side, I talk to Chinese miners and take them to some gas locations, and I think they oversell a little bit of how complex it is. And I'm like, guys, oil and gas is like, most people don't understand the physics behind oil and gas and just how amazing it is. The operations that we carry out in this industry. I'm like, there's a lot of smart motherfuckers in this industry that can figure out mining if you give them enough time. And I mean, you guys obviously proof of that. So
a very different set of problems for a very similar type business model, but it's a whole new set of problems that, like, Ryan's dealt with all kinds of operational risk and drilling risk and all this for 10 years, but then to package that all up, you're kind of trading it in for this new industry that we're going in, even though they're somewhat related. The luxury is that it is the same business model, but it's a very different set of problems that he's dealing with now.
Yeah. We should talk about that some, because a lot of people in this industry have a hard time still wrapping their heads around Bitcoin mining off of nat gas. I mean, still really early in the game. I mean, it's crazy when you have people like us that have been talking about it, doing it since 2017, 2018. That was 4 or 5 years ago, but we're still in the infancy of the idea. And so people are still trying to learn about it, which is no problem at all. Like, I love teaching people about it. But I think one thing that's really interesting to me is how similar Bitcoin mining is to being an E&P. And we were just talking about this before we got on the mic, is like, hey, you have two inputs that are really crucial to the business model. And that's the underlying commodity price, which is Bitcoin or oil and gas.
Yeah.
And then what's the difficulty to mine and extract that? You have, difficulty for Bitcoin mining, and then difficulty, on an oil well. What's the drilling and completion? Like, how complex is it to get it out? And so very similar there.
Yeah.
And then you start using external financial instruments to hedge, and it starts to look a lot like the E&P game. Like, Bitcoin mining is very similar to mining hydrocarbons.
And I even like to think of like the difficulty in Bitcoin as like a type curve out over time on your well, like a natural decline,
Yeah.
It's something that you can look at that's kind of one of the ways I look at it, is like, you've got wells that start off on a hyperbolic decline, and, they're going to be first year decline X%, second year, and they'll start flatlining out. And that, Bitcoin's kind of on cycles of that, though, as opposed to just, but it's basically like drilling new wells almost, though. So
that's really interesting. Yeah, I haven't made that analogy to think of it in terms of type curves, but that's a perfect way to look at it. So for you guys, I think, Ryan, you made a tweet the other day that was really interesting to me. This is kind of going off into left field, but You posted a picture out in the middle of the night. You're out on the lease, working on the miners because you had noticed that hash rate had dropped, and so
Yeah.
there was some issue. Tell us a little bit about that story.
Well, like I said, I've been in operations my whole career, so I'm used to middle of the night phone calls. Getting it when you got 24/7 operations going on. But I was actually out. It was a couple of weeks ago. Justin called me. I was out chasing antelope around. I live up in Wyoming, so it's hunting season right now. So I was chasing some antelope, and he gave me a shout and said, "Hey, we lost a generator. We've got a couple containers down. We need to get somebody out, see what's going on. We lost some hash rate." And it's kind of the same mentality. It's it was 6 or 7 o'clock at night or whatever it was, and
This only happens on the weekend, by the way.
Oh yeah.
yeah.
So it's the
Always-
same
always
as
the way.
oil and
Yeah,
gas. Like,
exactly.
yeah.
Very
Yeah.
much another similarity.
And our site's in a really remote area. It's 3.5 hours from my house to get out there. It's very remote where we're at. There's honestly no houses, no towns, anything near it.
Yeah.
And we're running the show out there. Like it's all right. Well, I'll head out there and see what's going on and get it fired back up. So
What did the issue end up being?
at the time on that one, we were just it was just an engine sensor that we were having an issue with on a generator.
Okay, it's on the
the
gen set.
Oil sensor issue. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we've got it taken care of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
back to run, but
There was an interesting comment. I don't know if you saw this or not. I think it was from my buddy Dom on Twitter. But he made a comment like, I didn't think about using miners and looking at hash rate as almost like a flow meter for nat gas production too. So it's almost another way, like,
yeah.
it had nothing to do with the miners why you lost hash rate. It actually traced back to the gen set.
Yeah.
And so I thought that was a really interesting concept too. Like, it's just another KPI that you can keep track of to monitor
exactly.
overall performance.
And it kind of feels like being a pumper again. I used to pump wells in summer growing up, and so I think it was Gideon Powell or somebody had made a comment on Twitter that day too. It's like, what do we call Bitcoin miners in oil and gas that are like pumpers, that are going out to the wells to fix
Dude,
it.
I think we got to call them pumpers just as like homage to we should just make that a thing. Like, just call them pumpers.
Yeah.
Something that's like completely irrelevant to Bitcoin
I like
mining,
it.
but like someday
like it.
someone's gonna ask, like, why do they call us pumpers? And then
Yeah, exactly.
So how is it? You said that, y'all's mine up in Wyoming, really remote, 3 hours plus from your house. How is that with the IT and support? One, actually, I've got a question that someone just asked me yesterday that maybe y'all can answer. They were really curious about bandwidth, speed, and connectivity out on mines. And I told them my gut reaction is that speed probably isn't as important as just connectivity and latency and uptime.
Yeah. Latency is definitely the big one. Yeah.
Yeah. Can y'all speak on that a little bit?
Yeah. I mean, we're lucky that, and Justin, feel free to jump in. I don't want to take the whole thing, but
No, you're the ops guy, man.
a lot of our, communications, we're working with a company out of Wyoming that has handled all of our remote communications, whether it be on our drilling rigs, on our frac fleets, anything, all around Wyoming. So these guys have got, pretty much anywhere you are in Wyoming, they can hook you up. And that's how the whole industry's worked for years, right? Is working in remote areas, but being able to be connected all the time. And so we're actually bringing fiber from Casper off of Casper Mountain, pinging it off of another mountain called Pumpkin Buttes, and then pinging that back to our site. So it's all through radio.
Nice.
And so, we've got super fast internet at our site. You've actually, are you on Verizon, Justin?
Yeah, I am.
Yeah. So you get no service on our site.
Yeah.
But then
Now
we
do though.
Yeah, we
Yeah,
do
now
now.
we
But
do.
I
Yeah.
mean, when we first got out
Yeah.
there, we had the, all the miners running and we're connected to the pool. Everything's working great.
There
And
was
Miners
one-
guys can't
connected,
even
you
put
can't
phone
make a
calls
call.
out of our
Yeah.
site.
Yeah, we can't send a phone call except from this one hill that's out there, not too far away. But yeah, we can mine Bitcoin out.
I got to come see this mine sometime. So I actually I've worked up in Wyoming quite a bit. One location I remember specifically was in Wamsutter. So I don't know geographically, where that is located.
Yeah,
to
we're
y'all.
in like central Wyoming. Is
Okay,
kinda where we're
cool.
at. Yeah,
Yeah.
depending on how much we want to release as to where we're at.
I
But
just don't feel like I've ever been to the nice parts of Wyoming because everywhere I've been is always just like shitty and so windy.
Well,
It's either
if you
hot or
follow
cold.
Ryan's Twitter and saw his what looks like a Pottery Barn advertisement,
Yeah.
Sheridan, you would know Sheridan is one of the pretty parts of
I know,
Wyoming
I
for
see
sure.
that. I'm like, dude,
Yeah.
it's not the parts of Wyoming I've
Yeah,
been to.
yeah.
yeah. I mean, my strategy for getting a house and some land in Wyoming was overlaying a wind map over the state.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if you do that, you can find some little pockets that have very low wind in comparison.
Well,
to the
it's
rest of the
crazy
state.
because I grew up in West Texas. Like, we have high wind there, right?
Yeah.
And then I go up to Wyoming and I'm like, literally, I cannot keep my hard hat on. Like, it just
Yeah.
constantly just taking off across location. I'm like, Jesus Christ, man, the
Yeah.
wind here's terrible.
Yeah,
So,
it depends where you're at. There's some wind. I mean, in some places you don't even want to say wind. It's called the W word. Like if you say it, people are going
it's
to be
like a
pretty
curse word.
upset.
You can't say
Yeah.
it. It's forbidden.
Yeah, exactly.
So one thing that I like about Jay is the mindset that you guys have towards the business model. And, I think everyone that talks about Bitcoin mining off of nat gas, I would say 99.9% of people automatically go to flare.
Yeah.
Flared gas, stranded asset, ESG makes sense. Hey, if we're burning off this gas, we might as well convert it into Bitcoin and unlock value out of it. My take is, and it really didn't take me a lot of time to get to this thought process, was it's not scalable. And you guys came to that same conclusion. Let's dive into that a little bit. And, a lot of people, like, they don't think about, hey, we just take this shit straight off the tap out of a pipeline and buy gas and mine with it. So let's talk about that some and how you guys kind of came to that thought.
Yeah. Yeah. So, like you said, we kind of told you how we came to the conclusion and looking at things and just wanting to scale up. And Ryan's done a lot of numbers on some of this and just kind of digging into the flare gas in Wyoming in particular. But just having worked in operations and oil and gas operations, from a scalability standpoint, wells are constantly declining. So that flare is going to decline over time. And if you're always trying to kind of keep up with the flare, the amount of gas that's available by moving machines off of your site, you're not going to be able to be a true Bitcoin miner long term. We do think it's a great product. It's a great service that's out there for oil and gas companies to utilize, and we offer it ourselves. It's not the only aspect to our business though. And so we wanted to be Bitcoin miners, and we felt like the best opportunity to do that off of natural gas is to scale up. And the best place to do that is a residue line and a gathering line. Large gathering lines coming through over in that basin that we're in is just a perfect opportunity for us to go out, grab some property out in a very remote location and use a very little amount of gas off that system in order to scale up dramatically faster than what you could by running around chasing flare wells. So
Yeah.
that was really just, I mean, as we looked at it, and it's like, look, you make your economics work by your scale. The only way we can scale the speed we want and keep it there is to buy off a residue line. So that's what we did.
And
Yeah.
I think our model too is that, you take a look at having events and what happens, before them, after them and everything. And we just really see an advantage of being able to scale quickly. So when Justin's saying scale, he's meaning like, how can we build up our mine quickly now to basically mine as much Bitcoin as we can now before the next halving event? And that's really, something that we look at as to, part of our strategy. And like you said, the flare gas Bitcoin mining absolutely works. Like there's definitely a service for it out there, and there's a place for it. It's just for us, in terms of us building our model to build up, scale quickly, build it as big as we possibly can. We just looked at, we're going to be chasing numerous different locations, and you have to have the next locations in mind as well as to where you're going to go to. Or like Justin mentioned, you run the risk of stranded capital where your well declines enough, you can't keep your generator fully loaded anymore. And now you've got ASIC miners that aren't being powered. And so they have to have a home somewhere.
Yeah.
And so, we
work
just
over downtime, all kinds.
Yeah. And we were, like we mentioned that earlier, we had hole in the tube and broken rods, surface issues, things like that. You're bringing a smaller generator out because you're not producing enough gas anymore. So, if we're an operator, it absolutely has its place and we'd be doing it. But for us, like Justin mentioned, being full-time Bitcoin miners, it's just not the route that we wanted to go, is to continue to chase more and more.
Yeah.
And coming
locations.
from the E&P world, where we were part of a management team at a E&P operator, the model of growing your mine to compare it to like an E&P, the best way to do that is off of natural gas off a residue line. If we're doing it just off flare, we're operating more as a service type company instead of a E&P type company. So
Mhm.
that to me was the biggest difference for me of like, yeah, I'm with Ryan. I want to go do the midstream line and grow as fast as we can and drive down our costs, continue to every day work on driving our operating costs down as low as possible. But get up and operating, because like you said, that next halving event, it feels like it's far away right now. It's not that far
Yeah.
away. Things are moving so fast, and they'll be here before we know it. And we
Yeah.
want to be primed for that
Yeah.
event. So
So let's talk about the halving here in a minute. Couple things. One, I love the mindset. Like, you guys refer to yourselves as a Bitcoin mining company. You're not an EMP. You're a Bitcoin mining company. This is what I've been telling EMPs is like, guys, you need to get out of the mindset of referring to yourself as an EMP. Look at yourself as a Bitcoin mining company. You just happen to own the underlying power asset. And I think that you guys are aren't you looking at some sites that are actually not nat gas
yeah,
that
we
are,
are.
yeah. So like
We are.
you
Yep.
guys are actually even agnostic
Mhm.
to power supply, whether it's nat gas, grid,
Yeah.
solar, wind, like
Yeah.
you guys don't give a shit.
No, yeah, you could get me into a whole nother thing, but we're not against any form of energy as long as it's profitable. Because if we really want to get into a situation where, wind and solar and all these renewable type assets are actually feasible, they have to be profitable. And
Yeah.
so people will not continue pouring money into them if they don't start returning some investment. So,
And I think a lot of other people would jump in and say like, well, it has to be reliable too, because you'll say, well, wind or solar, let's call them unreliables. But nobody wants to just say that profit is like the underlying reason behind their business. But to be honest, like if any of these systems are unreliable, they're not going to be profitable.
Yeah.
So like saying that profit is your number one driver at your company is completely fair and honest.
Yeah.
Because if it's not profitable, it most likely isn't reliable. It most likely isn't scalable.
It's funny how controversial of a take that
It
is
is.
on Twitter. Like,
yeah.
dude, economics run the world. Like,
Yeah, exactly.
That's how it works.
Well,
Yeah.
and I look at Bitcoin mining as the bridge. We've talked about natural gas forever being a bridge to a more renewable future. Bitcoin mining is actually that bridge, in my opinion, because that's how you get to those more renewable type of forms of energy through profit, building up to that.
Yeah.
And you can go and build a solar field or a wind farm, and it's not going to be profitable for years and years and years.
Mm-hmm.
You can build it and set it up on a Bitcoin mine and wait for the other infrastructure, the residential development or the commercial development to come in and still be making profit at that time, which is
Yeah.
going to lead people to do more activities like that, which will obviously naturally grow the more renewable side of the energy sector as
Yeah,
well.
that's actually like there's a pretty controversial take on Twitter um about whether or not Bitcoin is a battery. And I think some people take it a little too
Yeah.
literal,
Mhm.
but I see Bitcoin operating as a battery in that sense of,
Mm.
hey, you can take this renewable asset, say it's a wind turbine farm that isn't going to be economic for years, and through mining you can unlock value that now from a economic perspective makes that project work.
Yes.
Yeah.
And if the project works, if the numbers work, then the adoption of that energy source
Absolutely.
works. And so that's how, like, when someone says Bitcoin is a battery, like, I'm not taking that's like literal, like
Yeah.
fucking storing energy, but you're storing value and unlocking value
Yes.
from an energy asset that otherwise would have been stranded. And to
Mhm.
your point, I agree with you 100% that right now, you have a ton of money pouring into these projects, but if they don't return capital, that it's not going to,
Yeah.
Mhm.
You
people aren't
shouldn't
going to
be doing
keep,
it.
like, the world can't operate like that.
Yeah.
And so I guarantee, like, you're going to start seeing people start realizing that. And I think
Mhm.
that it is a bridge for the energy transition, because once the numbers make sense,
Yeah.
then there can be adoption and more money poured into it. So, a couple of things. You're talking about the halving. Um, let's talk about y'all's model a little bit, because one thing that I found talking through these miners is the way that you think about Bitcoin also heavily affects the business model as well. Because you have people out there that are looking for a cash arbitrage, say, oh, I can get cheap energy here, I can mine Bitcoin, and I can convert to fiat. I've talked to other miners that say, hey, we want to hold as much Bitcoin on our balance sheet long term. We want to become, a power player in cryptocurrency. We want to hold Bitcoin. We believe Bitcoin's going to $1 million a coin. How do you guys think about that? How does y'all's business actually operate?
Yeah.
Are y'all trying to hold Bitcoin on the balance sheet
Yeah,
and
we're-
also sell, convert some to cover operating expenses?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, in order to pay operating expenses, you've got to have some other access to capital. And yeah, I mean, our mindset is definitely to hold as much Bitcoin as we can as a company. But at the end of the day, we also have operating expenses too that we need to.
No one's
we need
taking
to cover.
Bitcoin right now.
Yeah.
And
Did y'all
so-
see? Did
Hopefully
y'all see
soon.
Lightning Network on Twitter? Like, that's big news.
Yeah,
Like,
it's
I don't know
really
if y'all
wild.
saw that or not, but that's
huge.
huge. Like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna tell all the people that hate Bitcoin on Twitter, I'm gonna start sending them like $5 payments
Oh,
through
yeah.
Lightning Network. Just
Yeah.
like, see how easy this shit
Yeah,
is.
exactly.
I encourage that too. Yeah.
Yeah.
There are a lot of opportunities though for ways that you don't have to cash your Bitcoin out. Whether it be loans out against your already mined Bitcoin. There are certain things.
Yeah.
So our strategy is obviously risk mitigation is one of them, to make sure that we're not over leveraged or overexposed to any downside risks that could completely wipe us out or anything. But at the same time, for us personally, trying to hold as much Bitcoin, we see that as what our strategy was going into this. We looked
Yeah.
at it as, it's an appreciating asset. One of the things that Justin and I try to do when we're talking to operators to explain to them is like, say, look, you can take a molecule of gas, convert it into electricity, mine Bitcoin with it. And let's say, using the latest and greatest processors, you got an S19 right now, if you're, over $30 per MCF realized revenues,
Mhm.
if in Bitcoin value. Well, let's say now that you hold on to that Bitcoin for 2 years and the Bitcoin price, doubles, triples, whatever. But if it appreciates, it's allowed you to have the ability to store that gas molecule like you have a storage cavern, and you can sell it at a market price that you want to realize. Whereas most operators have never had that luxury in the history of oil and gas to put their gas somewhere else, but to at any point in time liquidate it should they need to,
Mhm.
and potentially have it at a market price that they want to realize. So, I mean, that's an amazing thing when you think about it. And that if an operator dedicated some small portion of their gas stream, like, 1%, 5%, 10%, you start taking a look at that and say, hell, how much does Bitcoin need to appreciate before that 1%, 5%, or 10% is actually worth more than the 90% that they sold down the line? Like you
Yeah.
can start thinking of it that way, as trying to capture that arbitrage value. So
Yeah.
that to me is like really one of the most powerful things about it, is to think of it that you are converting that gas molecule into a digital form.
Yeah, I think, people have a really hard time understanding the concept that something that you can't see or physically hold has value, right? And I mean, this isn't just oil and gas guys, this is the entire world. And
Yeah.
I've been in Bitcoin since 2016, 2017. And it really, even then, it took me a while to like really understand how there was value in the network and what Bitcoin actually was. And so it's hard for people to wrap their mind around, hey, it's not just a number on a screen. Like there's actual tangible value. And just because you can't see it or hold it doesn't like there's
Yeah.
value in the network, right?
Yeah.
And so getting oil and gas guys to understand that is hard. But I think oil and gas guys are some of the most capitalistic people in the world. And when you just start showing them numbers, so we were talking before we started recording, like, I mean, we're talking $35 an MCF compared to like everyone's elated right now that we got $5 gas,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
everyone's on top
Yeah.
of the
Can
world.
you imagine the rigs you'd see running around if you
Oh my
saw
God.
$30 or $35 an MCF?
Yeah, there wouldn't be enough rigs.
Yeah.
There
I'm
would not be
telling
enough
you,
rigs.
man.
It's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah.
Like we'd be poking holes in the ground all over the
Yeah.
place. And so I think that that's how you get them to understand. But then even then it's like, hey, look, you make $30 per MCF. There's still that differentiator between, hey, are you an EMP that's looking for cash arbitrage to unlock more value from your gas, or are you a Bitcoin mining company
Yeah.
and you want to hold Bitcoin on the balance sheet? And I think like I'm a firm believer in the new age EMP. Someone like you guys that say, hey, we're a Bitcoin miner.
Mhm.
We happen to own and know how to operate nat gas wells. Like here's the thing is like even these Chinese miners, like they can't just come in and buy gas assets.
Yeah.
Like they're gonna fucking they're
Yeah.
gonna trash those
Yeah.
assets or blow themselves up.
Yeah.
Like a
Yeah.
very complex process to operate nat gas
Yeah.
wells. So it has to be oil and gas people that do it. But I think you have to have that we're a Bitcoin mining company
Well, and I
mindset.
think one of the obstacles right now for oil and gas companies to dive in the way they want to is obviously it's a new form of, we'll call it currency. We believe it will be. It is a currency in some countries. So yeah, it's a new form of an asset, right? A new commodity that they got to try to figure out. And then you factor on top of it the traditional way of wiring money and things like that that they've gotten comfortable with because it's just been what it is. There's not quite the same financial tools there are in the Bitcoin world as there is in banking, at least that they're comfortable with. But there's more and more groups coming up that are offering different financial tools that will make it easier for institutions to continue to come into
Mm-hmm.
Bitcoin and really start factoring it into carrying on their balance sheet and all that. But I think that is one of the big obstacles. But what we've worked with Unchained Capital and Genesis and some other groups that are offering more and more things that I think will make it easier for oil and gas executives to make this a piece of their portfolio and a
Yeah.
piece of their
Yeah.
stuff going forward.
Because I mean, it is a conservative industry, right?
Yeah.
Like we've gotten used to our tools, and we go to school for oil and gas, or whatever it is. But as soon as you come out of school, you're taught the oil and gas way of doing things, and so that's really almost all of us. That's all we know, and so you try to show them something new, and obviously people are going to be hesitant, and that's really what one of our our methods is at Jay. Is it's like, look, we're able to explain this to you guys in a way that helped us understand it and learn it
Mhm.
because we are oil and gas guys. So hopefully we can explain it to you that you guys can understand it as well, because we're trying to speak your languages
Yeah.
as well. So I think that's helping for sure.
I think it's helping a lot.
Yeah.
And I think, like you said, the numbers are there. At some point, it's going to be basically irresponsible for a company to not allocate a certain percentage of their gas reserves to mining Bitcoin.
Yeah.
We look at it as a hedge as well. I mean, we are ecstatic that $5 an M gas is here, right? But I don't think that that's the long term spot. I could be wrong. Everybody's wrong. I don't think anybody really saw prices doing what they're doing right now.
Yeah.
But we know that the higher the prices get, the more wells are going to get drilled, and
Yeah.
so that's going to end up bringing prices down eventually. And
Yeah.
so it's a good way to hedge yourself.
I
And
like
protect
I like the
yourself.
idea of a competitive marketplace. Like,
Mhm.
hey, it's great if gas supply demand is working out to where you have $5 gas, but it's also awesome that hey, you can make $30 an
Mhm.
MCF over here, and then guess what? You start having equilibrium
Yeah.
between,
Yeah.
and so now you're like, I don't give a shit if it's going towards hash rate or if it's going in the
Mhm.
pipeline. that's what a free market is, right?
Yes, yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. So, yeah, we same wavelength as you're talking, man.
So there's a couple of I've been over here like typing up some notes as
No, you're
like
good.
or else I'll forget. There's couple comments that I see on Twitter a lot. The other day, someone so I tweeted out that I had dinner with an engineer over at EOG that is running a Bitcoin mine for them in New Mexico. And one of the comments that I got was like, "Oh, that's a great fucking look for a public company to be using energy to mine a fake cryptocurrency."
Right.
Like my rebuttal is like, how something that has $1 trillion market cap, how do you still think that that's fake?
Yeah.
Yeah,
First
We
off, like
and we
blows
run
my
into that all the
yeah.
time.
mind
I'm going to
blow-
let Justin speak to this more because
Yeah,
I think he's
because
a lot.
this like this is gonna be something that you guys have to deal with
Yeah.
100%.
Mhm.
Like people like that they're gonna once this idea really gets legs under it and gains traction, people are gonna be coming out of the woodwork saying like, "Oh, you're using our nation's resources to
Yeah.
mine a fake cryptocurrency,
Yeah.
or you're killing the environment to mine fake cryptocurrency." And like these people still don't believe that there's value
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
Bitcoin network.
I mean,
And
I'll jump in
yeah.
quick, but I'll let Justin take, because I think Justin, when speaking as to like, the ESG side of
Mhm.
Bitcoin, a lot of people just focus on the E and not the S or the
A lot, I
G.
think everyone.
Yeah,
I was
and I
talking
think
about-
Justin
Yeah.
can really speak to this pretty good. But it's funny. Like we had a meeting a few weeks ago with it was a public company who had just hired a chief sustainability officer, and we had a meeting with the CEO, the COO, and the chief sustainability officer who was new to the company. And he just said, "Look, guys, honestly, if we're not flaring the gas, um, we just can't dedicate gas to Bitcoin mining because we just can't justify burning it into a generator, even though you've got catalytic convert. You're making sure that your emissions are lower than it would be on a flare." And then I just said, "Look, where are you selling your gas to?" And he goes, he explained where it's heading to, and I go, "What is that power plant that your gas eventually gets to? What are they doing with it?" He goes, "Well, they're," and then he stops himself and he goes, I see where you're going with this. And I go, "Yeah, they're burning it to create electricity."
Scope 2 and Scope 3 emissions are a
Mhm.
bitch.
Yeah. And I said, "And look, if the demand responses aren't that high at the time when that gas is being burnt, it's going to be wasted. It'll be wasted electricity." And so I'm like, "So you're telling me that you can't do, as part of your company's strategy, what people downstream of you are doing with your product,
Mm-hmm.
even though you could capture a higher profit for your shareholders. So you're saying that that's not a path you can go down." And he goes, I get where you're going with this. Yes, it's a valid argument." And he just goes, "It's very tough to make people understand on the investment side of this." Like
Yeah.
basically to
Everyone focuses on the E,
Yeah.
but my thing is, if you look at the S and the G,
Yeah.
it's like, don't we have a duty for society to unlock value from our nation's resources?
And that's
Like,
Justin here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so the other day, and I encourage anybody who's listening to attend the Houston Bitcoin meetups. They have them once a month, and this last one, I think it was last week. My days are literally running together, but I believe it was last Wednesday.
yeah, last Wednesday I was there.
And I was speaking to that on the panel, was basically that instead of looking at, okay, Bitcoin mining, it's anti ESG is the rhetoric basically. And we're looking at the E in that only, just as you said. But and then we look at it from a global standpoint as well. We're not looking at it just, regionally for the Powder River Basin or
Mhm.
for, the Delaware Basin or whatever. It's a global problem, climate change, right? And so why are we not looking at what that gas is being used for and what it does for people globally instead of just the environmental side on a global scale? You got to look at the S and the G on a global scale as well. And I'm going to continue to delve into this and dive into it and research it more. But if you look at what Bitcoin does for people around the world that live in governments that are corrupt, that manipulate their currency, that withhold banking opportunities from their individual citizens, and then just look at people in poverty, not only around the world, but even here that don't have access to banking systems. Bitcoin has an opportunity to replace that for individuals around the world, and it is doing that now. I can give you examples that back in the financial crisis in 2008, 2009, Greece was not allowing people to take out more than $16 a day of their own money. And so there's situations like that around the world. And we ignore that because it's not on the minds of the agenda for some groups. They want to attack it all from the climate change front. And I think if you really spent time boiling it down, you could find what the real agendas are as well. But I do think that, look, we are for being environmentally responsible. We are completely. We have no problem with that. Like I said, we're for all forms of energy if they're profitable, because that's the only way they're truly going to be sustainable.
Mm-hmm.
But we have to stop looking at the ESG kind of scorecard by only identifying what the E score is. Each molecule of gas, or each measurement, each kilowatt that is used to power Bitcoin mine, we need to see, all right, what is the impact that is having on the populations around the world that are utilizing this technology for feeding their family. I've visited with a guy after the meetup the other day from Venezuela, and he came up and he said, "Thank you, because what you said is exactly what we did and what we're doing now." And it was basically that people are mining there off little S9s. Some of them are mining other alt currencies as well, just to feed their families.
Yeah.
Buy basic necessities. And so that's why both parties should embrace what Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining in particular can do, because just like I was saying about expanding, making projects profitable, you can expand the grid, bringing power to people that don't have access to electricity currently. There's so many cases that you can use.
There shouldn't be a political stance
No.
as to why Bitcoin mining is bad or you don't like it, because if you look at both sides of the spectrum, it's like if one is more to help the people, well, Bitcoin helps that. If one is to be capitalistic, well, Bitcoin helps that too. So how can one party or both parties even be against it? Like, it's a apolitical thing.
Here's what I've always told people about Bitcoin is I think it's really hard for Americans to understand the value proposition of Bitcoin because we're privileged.
We are.
We have access to banks. We've never been in a situation where government's making run on our money. Like, people think like tinfoil comes out all the time when I talk about 401ks and things of that. I'm like, man, I feel like those are forced savings sometimes for like if the government ever needs to make a run. And you've seen that happen in other countries, right? But here in America, we've been very blessed not to have to deal with those things. I talked to a Bitcoin miner the other day in Argentina, and he's running a mine off of nat gas. And his thing was, he's like, my regulatory risk I deal with, he's like, I have to worry about which political party's in, because if it's the other party, they may seize all my assets and my bank account. He's like, you guys don't have to worry about that in the US. I'm like, shit, man, like we don't. Like, we're worried about, hey, does this make sense in the numbers? Like, we don't have to worry about if someone gets elected and seizes our assets. And so it blows my mind when I see people on Twitter talking shit about Bitcoin or celebrating when it goes down, because every single person should be rooting for Bitcoin. And because you're here in the US and you went to a tier 1 or top tier private university and you have access to a bank account, like you don't give a fuck about other people around the world, fuck you. Like, I can't stand
the
that.
biggest risk for people are in legacy financial institutions, where people will start pivoting or moving into more of the Bitcoin space, and the people that don't move there fast and adopt it early and are the last ones kind of standing, they're probably going to be the ones at the most risk. And then like going back, I think I saw something today or yesterday that El Salvador now has more people using the Bitcoin right now than they do have people that actually have bank accounts. And it's been, what was it, September? It's been a month now, not even a month that they instituted that?
Yeah, a couple. Yeah,
which is incredible.
Yeah, it's, just what it can do for people around the world. And then even like people think that Bitcoin doesn't have utility. And I'm like, look, I've sent 2 5-figure transactions international. This is like, I don't know, let's say 2017, 2018, kind of when I first started getting into Bitcoin. I just want to try it. And it was the easiest transaction I'd ever done. Like, I can't go to the bank and make a Swift wire transfer like that without I have to go down to the bank. It's a pain in the fucking ass. This took me minutes, cost me pennies. I'm like, that's the utility right there. Like, and I was, there's a couple of guys on EFT the other day that was just talking, like, I talked to people one by one. especially as oil and gas guys, like they don't understand Bitcoin. It's like, hey, let me just tell you my perspective. And they brought up gold, and I'm like, what's the utility of gold? Oh, well, it's used to make watches and jewelry. I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
the utility of gold
Yeah.
is to make jewelry.
Yeah.
Something that's
Yeah.
not necessary
Yeah. You
to
tell me
life.
what has more of an impact,
Yeah.
making jewelry for people or
Yeah.
supporting
So
a network.
I go down the list of
Exactly.
utility and value that Bitcoin has. I was like, that's the difference
Yeah.
between gold
and I do the
Bitcoin.
same thing too with like, wash or dryers. Like,
Yeah.
there's the same amount of power being used in the United States to power your clothes dryers as there is the entire Bitcoin network. So which one has more utility?
Yeah.
Like it's the conversation stops there. Like it's
Yeah.
literally, there should be no further discussion on whether Bitcoin's consuming too much power.
Yeah.
And the one thing the oil and gas industry doesn't realize is that I wholeheartedly believe that people within the oil and gas industry still don't realize the power of an MCF.
Oh yeah.
Like,
yeah.
I think people have just gotten accustomed to, we make 30 million cubic feet a day here. We send a BCF down this line. They don't truly see what the downward impact is
What
on
the power
plants
density
and
of
stuff.
that. Yeah.
But, if you're making 4+ kilowatts per MCF, you start taking that into consideration. So some of the largest miners, public mining companies in the world right now, like let's say they're at around 100 megawatts. And some are scaling bigger than that, have plans to go, significantly bigger. But 100 megawatt company right now is an upper echelon public Bitcoin mining company. Well, 100 megawatts converted back to natural gas is 24 million cubic feet, which we can drill one Haynesville well. We can drill one Utica, one Marcellus well. That's one well worth of gas.
We got 5 of those on one pad.
Yeah, exactly.
Literally, we were talking about this the other day. We have, I worked at Indigo Minerals for a while. Great company, but loved them. I know they're, got ate up by Southwestern, which Southwestern stock's killing it today, by the way. Just
I think all energy stocks are, man.
Yeah, they're
like
like 21% last I checked. So I'm all right with that. But yeah, we would drill a 5-well pad with all of them IPing at over 25 million a day, and that could run a huge mine, one of the largest, definitely the largest natural gas mine in the world. But
it would be one of the largest mines too.
Yeah,
and so I just don't think that the oil and gas industry even totally appreciates. So when I was saying earlier, like you could dedicate 1%, 3%, whatever. Like I truly mean that you dedicate such an insignificant amount of your gas to Bitcoin mining, and it could still be a very relevant sized Bitcoin mine in the grand scheme of
at
things.
At minimum, you should be doing it as a hedge,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Like at minimum,
Yeah,
like even if you're not full on, hey, we're a Bitcoin miner, you should be doing it as a hedge. Yeah, I don't think people understand, how little gas it actually takes to get it up and running.
Yeah,
I was going to tell you a thought I had earlier where we were just talking about Bitcoin mining enabling renewables. I'm literally going through this thought process right now because I want to get solar plus battery at my house, just because I think that we're going to have instability in the grid in Texas, and I'll pay a premium to be self-reliant and have access to power.
Right now too.
And so I'm like, oh shit, what if I get a couple of ASICs here running? I've seen the boys over on Twitter, they built their box, their like soundproof box for the ASICs. I'm like, man, I'd have that running out on the back patio. And like, will that start like from an economic perspective? Because like for me, and also like I don't look at it as cash arbitrage. Like I'm the same way. Like I just want to accumulate Bitcoin on my balance sheet. So I'm even looking at that like just for a distributed power system at my house. Like, hey, can I make this make more sense if I get a couple of computers here mining? So I think you take that idea and extrapolate it over bigger commercial wind and solar farms. That makes sense. I know a question that a lot of people have around Bitcoin mining is how mineral owners are handled. And so would love to ask you guys, and I'm not sure how minerals work up in Wyoming, but obviously, you guys are familiar with different states. And one of the combative comments I always get is, oh, just fuck the mineral owners, right? Like, I'm sure they're not getting paid anything. And I've seen people that are doing this that are paying mineral owners spot of what they'd be getting if it was going into the pipeline. Like, how do you guys think about this?
So that is actually, I'm actually on a panel for the National Energy I gotta get the name right.
Dude, all these associations, I'm like, hey, look, I'm not gonna like the acronym's too much for me. I'll show up.
But I'm excited about it. It's a big one, and I'm glad they're having me. I'll get it right, and I'll give them an apology that I get this right on this. But it's next month, and it's about that very issue. Oh, it's one of the topics that will come up. But when we were at Century, that was one of the things that we had to evaluate as well when we were putting the one out on our site. And I'm a land guy by background. I'm an attorney. I've worked, pretty much exclusively in oil and gas. And so the way I looked at it, and after, consultations with other guys about the same kind of situation, we're in an unknown world with that, right? I think anytime that people start hearing about the type of money you can make from this, they're going to find a way to kind of get their foot in the door and want to have that conversation at the very least, or get a piece of it, most likely. So the way we looked at it is that those leases, for the most part, and I think you're going to see this change with new leases going forward. People are aware of this. Landowners are so much more savvy than they used to be. And they're going to want to get a piece of that. But assuming you're under some vintage leases or, pre 2018 lease, most likely you didn't address cryptocurrency in it. And probably even after that, you haven't. But going forward, we anticipate that being something. But we look at it like, look, your lease entitles you to royalties from hydrocarbons. And I believe, in an effort to mitigate your risk, and also in order to be fair to the landowners, you should pay a reasonable rate for that, a market rate for that. So for the gas that would traditionally be flared, right? What we did was that very thing. We were selling gas on another asset, and it actually would be more. We were paying them more than what we would have paid for them had we put that one line in that was going to be economic. So we paid them for every molecule that we flared. We paid them the equivalent of what it would have been royalty wise had we sold that gas.
Yeah.
And based the price on what we were getting at the other market. And I think that is number one, without going too deep into like the legalese of it all. You're basically making them whole for what their lease entitles them to. What you're contractually obligated to do, you're making them whole for it. And I'm sure some, plaintiffs' attorneys would probably disagree and want to have that conversation. But I do believe that is the way to handle it. And you're basically mitigating your risk going forward, to put the burden on the other side to show why they're entitled to proceeds that you receive for an activity that you're using that gas for, that they're being paid for. Because at that point, it's kind of like we were talking about earlier. How far down do you draw that line? Because
I was about to say, like, you don't go to Exxon's refinery and say, "Oh, you owe me."
What are you using your gas for?
Yeah, no. Like, all we're doing here is just transferring the downstream activity from a refinery to on pad, right? Like, so
arm's length transaction.
Yeah,
be fair. Treat the royalty owners correctly under the terms of their lease, and you shouldn't have an issue. I do think, though, going forward, I mean, landowners they're not. I mean, if I was an attorney, I'd be negotiating that into every single lease. So
yeah, I mean, look, this is one thing that I see as being the issue with like JVs between miners and E&Ps is that, like, you saw this in midstream and upstream, like, no one's going to get fucked on a deal, right? Like, dealing with a bunch of smart people. So if one party sees that you're just banking and rolling in over here, like, they're always going to want to get in on it. And so I think that's why you won't really see. You had this window of JVs as mining as a service, essentially, that could help out E&Ps. But moving forward, I think you have to be a Bitcoin mining company that owns the underlying energy asset, because you need to remove third parties.
Yeah.
You're never going to get around the mineral owner one. But
I think that's even with that, I mean, if you own the minerals, you own the minerals, lease as well. So that's where you start getting into quote unquote free gas. I hear free gas all the time, Twitter and everybody talking about stranded gas and all this. I'm like, oh yeah, free gas. I'm like, there's no such thing as free gas. You're not getting free gas.
Like working with like Chinese miners, like I'm telling them, like, okay, this is when it's going to be. And they're like, wait, I thought we could get free gas. I'm like, dude, is anything in this world free? You think you're going to get, like, they fight wars over energy. You think you're going to get free energy? What the fuck's wrong with you?
They realize, like, somebody had to drill that hole to get it out. They're going to get their money back.
In order to get approval to drill that well, they had to show their economics and how they were going to sell their product,
Well, this is just something that I'm really excited about. I think actually one of my investors in Digital Wildcatters is an investor in Bitcoin mines, and he's from a management team. And him and I were talking. He thinks that Bitcoin mining is the new shale, and I mean, this is coming from a guy that made a lot of money off of shale, right?
Right.
So you have smart people that are seeing it,
Yeah.
and I think right now, Chuck and I talk a lot about this, but there's a deficit or a vacuum in the equity space and capital space, and I know you guys, y'all are constantly raising capital for new projects, so y'all can probably speak on this a little bit, but the capital side is still trying to wrap their head around. And I think what's interesting is you go to the oil and gas investors and pitch this idea to them, or do you go to the crypto guys and say, hey, we understand how to power these things and get the capital from them. So I think that's kind of an interesting dynamic in the industry right now.
Well, and I think that is one of the areas where there's been just a lack of communication or understanding from the groups. I mean, you get a lot of, like Ryan pointed out, oil and gas is a very conservative industry, and it's very used to having things done a certain way and all that. Bitcoin mining and just crypto in general is more of a kind of new techie type of endeavor, and so when you're going in to talk about these kind of tech ventures to an oil and gas group, they're like, I don't know about that. We're oil and gas guys. And then you get the other side of it. You got oil and gas guys coming in to talk to these crypto type VC groups. And they're like, we don't want to touch oil and gas. We don't want anything to do with that.
Yeah.
So it's really a lack of, you have very different people in those two industries. And not to go give Jay a plug, but I do think that's something that Ryan and I actually bring to the table, in Jay in general, is just that, we have been executives at oil and gas E&P groups and raised money with 2 different groups now, and 3 counting the Bitcoin mining stuff. And actually like 5, if you factor that in. He's raised from multiple places. But yeah, we've got experience on both sides of that. And I think it just gives a little bit more comfort to some of these oil and gas type groups that are wanting to dip their toe in or want to kind of feel the waters out a little bit before they dive in. Just knowing that, okay, these guys come from our space. They know how to talk our language. We know how to put together a presentation that's going to make sense to them and speak the language that they've been speaking for the past 20 years.
Yeah.
And
the groups that are going to kill it are going to be these groups that have someone already in the organization that is, Bitcoin maximalist, or just, a Bitcoin guy, right? Because they automatically pull him up and make sure that their models and how they're looking at it are correct. Because what we find is a problem is that you sit down with these guys and you show them the numbers and like, this is fantastic. Can we see your model? So you send it to them, and they spend 2 weeks, 3 weeks recreating their own model based off yours. And then, we've seen a lot of volatility in the Bitcoin price this year where it's up or down. And a month is a long time.
Yeah.
And if you're only focused on today and not, down the road, and you're making those decisions, a volatile price up scares people just as much as a volatile price goes down.
Yeah.
Because your whole model was built on a certain investment. Like, this is what an ASIC price is today.
Yeah.
And then 4 weeks goes by for them to refine and rescale their model. And then they go, okay, let's sit down and talk about it. We're feeling comfortable. And then you tell them, hey, you got to redo your model because prices are now 35% higher.
Yeah.
And then they go, well, shit, we don't want to do this. This is just too volatile.
They can't make a sound decision because there's so much volatility.
So,
that makes a lot of sense. And, it's actually something that you deal with in oil and gas too, with volatility. I think it's funny. Like, if you like oil and gas and you like Bitcoin, you just like getting kicked in the nuts a lot because there's so much volatility with, I mean, the most volatile commodities there are, right? But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. And, I made that tweet the other day about EOG mining Bitcoin because I didn't know they were doing that.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of people wrote it off like, oh, it's nothing burgers. Company's been mining for years. I'm like, first off, y'all act like this is like, I was like, it's big to me.
Yeah.
It's big news that EOG is mining because
Conoco is too.
Conoco is too up in Bakken. I posted a slide of that the other day. And that means that someone internally is thinking about this and they've worked it up the chain,
all the way to the top,
got approval for it. And once they start seeing what it's about, it takes off. Right.
Yep.
And so, like, if you're one of the people on Twitter that's saying, oh, it's not a big deal, fuck you. It is a big deal. It's a big deal when you
It's a
get these
big
large
deal.
independents.
You're not
that
seeing
start-
a lot of people that get into it and then go, that wasn't for me.
Yeah.
And then they go
That's
back.
what- yeah.
That's a
It's-
really good point.
If
Yeah.
you're seeing people getting into it, it spreads like wildfire.
Yeah.
Like it really does.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it'll be really interesting to see what happens over the next, I mean, even, year to 2
Yep.
years. I think that you're going to see a lot more talk about it and adoption.
Yeah.
You go to these Bitcoin meetups and there's a heavy presence of oil and gas guys there and girls
Yeah.
talking
yeah.
about it, So I think that it's exciting to say the
I
least. So,
wholeheartedly believe you're going to see nearly every oil company exposed to Bitcoin by at least holding it. At some point, oil's going to be traded in it.
yeah.
Or they're actually, mining with it. And I think that it's going to be not just on areas where they have, assets that are challenged to get to the market or single wells that, have a pipeline that needs to be fixed. So they're putting a Bitcoin mine. Like I truly believe that there's going to be a ton of oil companies that just dedicate some portion of their gas stream and realize like, look, all of our operating expense for this will be covered by all of our traditional production.
Mm-hmm.
And this is just pure, appreciating value
Yep.
if we hold it. And I think you're going to see a lot of it.
I agree
Yeah.
100%, man. So fascinating conversation with you guys. I think that I've had a few episodes on Bitcoin mining now, a couple over with Coley at Crusoe, which Crusoe's coming at it from a different angle. So get different
Mhm.
perspectives. I really like, when you made that post the other day out at location during nighttime, dude, I fucking
I
love
like
Twitter.
it too.
I love,
Yeah.
I love Twitter because like Twitter's like anti-hustle porn and like they hate the idea of like working 100-hour weeks and like
Yeah.
going off in the middle of the night. And so I was like anti-hustle. Twitter hates him. He's out here
Yeah.
posting pictures working in the middle of the night, but like it's like real oil and gas.
Yeah.
Like that's what you do. Like you
Yeah, I
get
had
out there and
Matt
you fix shit.
Gallagher, the former CEO
Yeah.
of Parsley, retweet that one. That was pretty good. I used to work for him. I was at Parsley for
Oh,
a
did
while.
you?
Yeah, but
Shout out to Gallagher. He's my
so,
boy. I love
so
that
that was
guy.
great to see. But yeah, I mean, it's just like we said. That's I think one of our advantages at Jay is that we are oil and gas guys. We've lived it, and
Yeah.
there's no job that's too small or medial for us. I mean, we're loading miners and U-Hauls and plugging them in ourselves.
I
and
love it.
We're changing filters ourselves.
I love it. So we're
we'll do
gonna
everything.
sometime soon. I'm gonna link up with you guys. I'm gonna come up to Wyoming and we're gonna
Oh,
take some
yeah.
video
Yeah.
out. We're gonna go
Out there.
walk the mine, and I'm gonna hang
Yeah.
out with you couple days, see what it's like operating a mine.
For
so,
sure.
If anyone wants to check y'all out, where can they find y'all? Do y'all have a website for Jay?
Yeah, jayenergy.com.
Okay.
Ryan's all over. He's a little growing Twitter superstar.
Yeah, I was gonna say Ryan's over on Twitter. I
Yeah.
haven't seen Justin over there.
I'm
so-
on
Yeah,
there.
we're-
He's on there just like kind of like creeping in the shadows.
I
He's
got-
like,
He's on the phone too much.
Yeah.
I'm on
so-
the phone all day
Yeah.
long.
just like someone's got to work around here. Ryan's
Exactly.
becoming the Twitter superstar. So
yeah.
cool. So yeah, if you're on EFT, Ryan, what's your handle over there?
RG_Leachman.
Okay, Justin.
JLB_OSO.
There you go. All right.
Yeah.
When I pump out the episode, I'll tag you guys so y'all can find it on my account, Frack Slap. So guys, appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, thanks for
enjoyed
having
this.
us.
having us.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure you're gonna get tons of inquiries from people wanting to know more about Bitcoin mining. So
Yeah, just hit us up.
Be
Yeah.
ready for it. So, all right, guys, if you haven't already, subscribe to the BDE newsletter. Go to digitalwildcatters.com, sign up for BDE, check it out on YouTube as well. Chuck and I are doing the live show now, 10:30 a.m. every Tuesday. That's 10:30 Central Time. So you can find us over on YouTube. We'll catch you guys next week.